So in this video we're going to talk about the role that technology has played in the development of music. And principally we're going to talk about recording. I'm recording this now, and so it seems like quite an interesting area of technology to focus on. But actually technology has been involved every step of the way as music has developed, pretty much from the first time that there were things on the planet known as humans. Really, behaviours, the way that humans have behaved have probably used music, and as soon as you stop singing and you start to use other objects and other devices to make sounds, you're kind of using technology right away, aren't you, really?
Absolutely, and certainly there's evidence from Iron Age and Stone Age burial sites that bones and other items that were found around a local environment, stones, bits of wood and so on, were used to make sort of basic musical instruments.
So it's difficult to actually give a date.
Exactly, to
actually
actually sort of find a finite beginning to it is very hard. Cave paintings as well. There's evidence of certain early attempts to make instruments. Whether it's something that you kind of blow down like a very primitive horn, or whether it's something that's strung taut across a piece of wood, something that is kind of like the same principle as a guitar. Those are both instruments that have been around for thousands and thousands of years. And of course, right up to our own time, we have everything from pianos to saxophones to 50 different sorts of percussion instruments to Casio keyboards and Moog synthesizers and various other things as well. So
other keyboards are available, I should probably say. I think that's absolutely right. And so, if we were to look at recording, because that's actually a thread that's run through a lot of this technological innovation, and it's allowed music really to go from something that you probably did in quite a sort of reasonably controlled community. So up to sort of the time we start to get music notation and music recording in the most basic way on paper, chances are that you would learn your music from somebody very close to you, and you would have a very close personal relationship with the person that either was the source for all the music that you were going to learn, or they were actually creating it for you to learn. So when would we say that music technology, in terms of recording, first kind of turned up?
Well, I suppose the principle of developed notation. So Guido d'Arezzo, we're talking 1500s. In terms of actually coming up with a system by which music could be written down, because as soon as you introduce any kind of method of recording in any sense, you change the way that music is received, and also the possibilities for composition. Because if you can write something down, you can write something down that is far more complicated than it might be if you're just trying to remember it. Which is not to say that those people who were learning everything orally were only learning very, very straightforward pieces of music, but the level of complexity, the number of people that you can have going on, singing or performing at any given time, increases exponentially if you have a form of writing it down. Mm-hmm. The next big stage after that has got to be the development of the printing press. Mm-hmm. And gradually, something you need to find out and insert into this recording, in fact, is the date of the Odd Hecaton, which was the first major collection of printed music in, I think it was the 1500s, in Italy. By the 1700s, music was being printed in small quantities, but it was being printed for general circulation. By the time we get to the 1800s, music printing and publishing is huge business, and the amount of money that is to be gained from the fact that you can circulate a piece of music in printed score for other people to play, whether it's in public or in private, is a serious money spinner. And it's that sort of system, that consumer system of being able to sell music in a printed form for other people to perform, that gets composers a degree of financial independence where previously they've been reliant on patrons.
That's it. I think we should say something about the earlier model, I guess, because so people like Mozart and Haydn, they really relied on probably royalty coming along and saying, well, we think your music's great. Do you want to write some music for my big banquets, my big receptions? I quite like you to write me an opera for the State Opera House, so because we think that opera is a good thing to have happening. But when you get to the 19th century, suddenly you do get this kind of emancipation, if you like, of composers. They're not reliant on one wealthy individual to provide them with a living. You've actually, because of this technology, because you can write a piece, and actually the production of printed music had become very sort of developed by that point. It was quite sophisticated, and they could produce relatively beautiful things. I mean, they were not just the kind of quite functional things that we may have seen earlier on. or whole handwritten scores, that were very just get the music down on the paper. But they're sort of starting to look quite beautiful, particularly these sort of big mass-produced editions of the great composers, if you like.
That's true, but I think even really at the beginning of the 19th century, particularly Viennese music publishing, which sort of tailed off and was dominated. Music publishing in the later 19th century was more based around Leipzig, but when it was primarily based in Vienna, so in the 1810s, 1820s, the editions that were being produced were terribly sumptuous, very, very beautiful, embossed leather covers, very, very spacious printing on the page, all sorts of wonderful illustrations around the outside, and so on and so forth. It's worth going back just a little bit, even to say that actually one of the reasons why this whole question of there being a larger public that was in touch with each other in order to be able to discuss what music was good, what music was bad, what music we should have at home, all of that is very much to do with the rise of newspapers and the emergence of a kind of a public sphere, if you like, where there were mouthpieces, in other words, newspapers and journals and that kind of thing, for people to discuss all sorts of cultural and social and political issues, and that was really an 18th century phenomenon. So music printing comes in on the back of that as being something that is part of culture, so it's very important, so everybody should engage with it because it's a symbol of the fact, if you can read music and play music, that you are a good upstanding citizen and a cultured and educated individual.
Do you think that's true, just out of interest?
Do I think it's true that if you can play music you're a cultured and
somehow you've got
individual?
this sort of cachet of being refined?
Well, not necessarily, but I think it very much depends how you engage with and how you think about the music that you're.
Because I think there's an element of that being true, but at the same time, it's all about the level to which, as you say, you engage with the material, and it becomes a part of you, not just this sort of trick. So it's all well and good being a performing seal who can go. If you do that on the piano, that's fine. I can teach you how to do that in probably 30 seconds. I don't think that necessarily marks you out as being a hugely cultured individual. So
no.
Anyway.
No, indeed.
Moving on. I think that's absolutely true. And so going through the 19th century, people were sort of racking up quite enormous fortunes. This was an important part of your income as a composer. Obviously, there was monies from performances, and there were other ways of making money. But for the first time, that became a really important thing. And then I think moving forward into the 20th century, something comes along which changes all of that again, really, or at least starts to. And that's obviously recording technology. So it's Edison, isn't it, who invents the wax cylinder recording machine?
Yep.
And so suddenly we have this ability not just to give you a piece of paper that shows you the music, and really you need somebody on the other end to decode that message for you, really, for it to be of any use as an enjoyable, entertaining thing. Because there's not many of us that sit looking at a score of a Beethoven symphony and sort of chuckle to ourselves as we see the good bits and the exciting bits come up on the page. So suddenly we do have this thing where we can put on, well, originally wax cylinders, and then it developing into records that we can put onto home music players, and that kind of, to me, seems to be quite an important moment. Absolutely,
and also it puts the performer at the front in a new kind of way, because the 19th century was really the first time when performers universally became celebrities. If they were very, very good, then everybody knew who they were, and they were considered to be extremely important. Rather than not just a sort of mouthpiece of the composer, but really, important figures in their own right. Recording meant that not only were you capturing a particular piece of music, but you were capturing a particular person playing that particular piece of music. Again, recording technology has an impact on the way that music is received. So to begin with wax cylinders, they are extremely malleable, they collapse very quickly, the thing didn't last very long. The earliest recording sort of discs that were written onto were a particular length of time, which meant pieces were often played too fast to try and fit them on, or they were cut over lots of different discs, or some sort of medley arrangement was put together so that the whole thing would fit. And the other thing was that the quality of the microphones, before the electric microphone was introduced, the actual sound equipment was such that instrumentation will be changed.
There's pictures, aren't there, of sort of Elgar sitting with very strange instruments in his orchestra.
There was a sort of thing that looks like a gramophone horn that was put onto
Hopefully
violins.
We can find the picture. I'll put the picture on.
Yeah,
talking about this, because it's really strange, and they're all kind of crowded around it in this kind of
they have to be
weird
very, very
way.
close, and a lot of extra woodwind and brass was used to back up because string sound didn't carry so well. So a lot of reorchestration went on. So to begin with, there was a huge amount of compromise on the behalf of the pieces themselves, as it were, to make them fit onto the equipment that was available. And gradually, as you say, you get 78s, you get long-playing records, and there's space. There's space to record everything, and the recording technology in the microphone gets sufficiently good that you can go back to the printed score rather than having to adjust it for the medium that you have.
But then don't forget the 45 as well, because the shorter 45 is a shorter one. It's the sort of the one that you can get about 3 or 4 minutes on. That kind of, I think, completely defined development of popular music, particularly in America, because that's the amount of time you had to fit your song in. Like you had to write, if you wrote a 10-minute song, but you couldn't get it on the disc, so it kind of was basically useless if you wanted to get your music out there. And so you could say that that's a moment where technology has kind of come in and actually not just sort of helped musicians and allowed them to do things they weren't able to do before, but actually it's come in and really fundamentally changed their ideas about quite deep level elements of music. And we talk about form as perhaps being one of the most important things. So form is just the way a piece is built. And in these things, we're looking at a kind of pretty bog standard verse, chorus, something else, middle eight, chorus, or something. These kind of structures become completely solid. And part of the reason they became so familiar and so common was that over a 4-minute period of time, you've got to make your impact, you've got to make your mark really, really quickly. And I think that's interesting that now we've got MP3 technology. Now I've got whatever it is, 2 hours left on this recording device. But I think still in pop music and rock music, there is the idea that if you haven't made your point within 3 or 4 minutes, you're not doing it fast enough.
I guess that's because as soon as some sort of tradition like that is established, everybody sticks to it, because then you have a form that's immediately recognisable as a particular kind of music. So if it happens to be delineated by a particular period of time, well then you stick to that even when the original reason for it being that is not necessarily there anymore.
I think that's really interesting. I really think that's really, really great, because at the same time you do have people who come and buck the trend, but it's very, very rare. So you get your Queen Bohemian Rhapsody, which is 7 or 8 minutes, I think, but it's difficult to think of really sort of big songs that were huge number ones, that are outside of this. Pretty standard. If you go and listen to Rihanna, every Rihanna song is verse, chorus, something else, chorus, verse, or something very, very simple. Very, very obvious structures. And I guess it's because all of those are kind of burnt into our consciousness as being the way that these songs work. And part of the pop music industry is getting a sound into people's heads very, very quickly. And one obvious way to do that is to do it in a very recognisable, very immediately sort of gratifying, enjoyable way.
And with repetition is very important if you're writing something short. Like that, because it means that your aim, if you're writing that kind of music, is to get it. You want it stuck in your head by the time the thing finishes. So you need to have heard certain bits of it enough times that you're going to remember it.